do. So, and the solution to that is we should try to mobilize as much as possible in term condition. But if we don't do that, we will still be dependent on the developed world. And in order for African countries to stand on their foot and try to do the developments in our own countries the way we want it, we have to make sure that we have the desired revenue in our country, and that in terms of equipping them, training them, building their capacity, as much as making sure that they are equipped in terms of IT. On that note, I want to say a very big thank you to my panelists as well as the presenter of the paper. And we have another one, but that one is online, so I'm not too sure whether the technology will allow us. If he's still following us, well, the IT is still around. Yes, Babatunde is telling me that the other fourth panelist is online, and maybe we can give her opportunity to come. And that she's no other person than Andrew Laura. And the questions we have for her is, what issue has e-commerce raised for tax administrations in South America, Uruguay, for instance? How was this issue resolved, and what lessons are there for Africa? So that's the questions we have for our panelists online. If the IT people are around, you can help us so that he can come in and do her presentations, and then after that we will have questions and answers from the floor. Thank you. Hello, Baba? If for example, we are having issues with having the other panelists, IT are able to bring her in, then we stop for interest of time, because I think the lunch will be ready very soon. And for interest of time, we can take questions from the floor. Whenever she comes in, then we give her opportunity. Thank you.
Guru Michael, I'm representing the chairman of the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offenses Commission. I'm a deputy director. I'm an investigator. My question is directed to Mr. Taiwo Yedele. I really appreciate your paper presented. I wish to state that education is the bedrock of development. If we are to develop a digital economy, then we need to have a digitized education system that can churn out digitized graduates that can run the system. Why I'm asking this question, last week or this week, I saw in a newspaper a state in Nigeria where the students in secondary school are writing exams on the floor. There are no tables, no chairs. So such a school do not even have the local infrastructure, not to talk of digital infrastructure. So the question is, what is African government doing when we talk about digitized education so that we can catch up? My second question, briefly, is that to digitize any economy will require powerful digital infrastructure. And in this area, you talk about both broadband penetration and availability. For instance, it was estimated that in Europe, both rural and urban dwellers will have access to at least 100 MBs per second broadband data available to them. But in Nigeria, you buy data, they give you 3 MB per second. You want to download, you want to make a payment, it keeps rolling for all eternity. So the question is that, is it possible for us to meet up with the world in this digitalized economy with the kind of infrastructure we have available?
Thank you very much for that question. I think I do agree with you 100% in terms of education. It's important for us to try and educate ourselves so we are not disadvantaged again, given that Africa missed out on the first, second, and third industrial revolution. But poverty is rife on the African continent, so we'll be naive to think that we have the resources to provide a computer, a desktop, and everything for every student. We will not. But we can start with what we have and then make the best of it, especially in terms of expenditure efficiency and also getting the private sector to collaborate and support government. Government alone cannot do it. So we all have a role to play. And maybe just to lash on that is the fact that even the tax authorities have to think about educating taxpayers and the public using technology. So if I'm watching a YouTube video, you see a lot of adverts will pop up. Why is it that the taxman's advert is not popping up? To just remind me that, this thing I'm doing, the benefits of paying taxes, and, a smiley face that makes me want to go and register the next minute. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Maybe we can move on to the. Yeah, there is somebody. Yeah, okay, you can come in here.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Dick Erie. I work with Federal Revenue Service and I coordinate the compliance group. My question goes to Taiwo, actually, the paper presenter. The e-commerce, from what you presented to us, we saw a dynamic involving economy or business activities that we need to quickly track as a revenue administrator. Now, and I also know that taxes are driven by law. And in Nigeria, we have both national and subnational tax administration structure that we run in terms of federalism. The closest attempt we've had recently is the Finance Act, annual Finance Act that we are now putting in place. And the last attempt to capture the digital economy or activity was a significant economic presence that was introduced. Now, the question is, by your assessment, do you think with only the significant economic presence introduced in the Finance Act, we have adequately addressed how to really tax the digital economy or e-commerce out there, or there's more that we need to do, and also do them quickly too, as we introduce them into the Finance Act, which is our latest base for amending the tax law. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that very good question. I think that the significant economic presence is only the starting point. We have started, it's not perfect, but it's good that we have something in place. I do not think that that is sufficient to address the digital economy. So like I said in my presentation, I think that we have to have an equal focus, both on the domestic aspect of the digital economy, as much as we do on the international aspect of it. So the significant economic presence is biased towards international aspect, which is, like I said, I keep saying, is important. But remember, once we banned Twitter in Nigeria, even me, I had no idea the level of commercial activity that was going on Twitter. I listened to one of the radio stations, Nigeria Info, one morning, just going to work, and come and see the number of young people that called in lamenting. One guy said he makes about $10,000 every month on YouTube. So on YouTube, if you get some level of followers and you do some videos, you can actually get adverts that Google will push to you, and then you get paid on a monthly basis. The guy said he was pushing traffic from Twitter to his YouTube page. $10,000 every month. This guy is never registered with anyone, let alone paying taxes. And there's so many of them like that. So we have to, in my view, focus on collecting data using intelligence so we actually know what's going on. We need to have an idea of the size of this digital economy we are talking about, both the domestic aspect and the international aspect, and then we can come back and say, this is our SCP, it's just a drop in the ocean in terms of what we need to do. What else do we need to do so we can get a fair share of the digital economy? Thank you.
Well, can you speak? Your mic is on.
I think it's off.
Your mic is off. Yeah.
I hope you can hear me now.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for really, doing that good introduction on my behalf. Mine is a contribution and a question at the same time. So I want to start by thanking really the presenters for really putting this issue of technological solutions, which is very high on the agenda of all our tax administrations here, by really talking about the importance. I believe the importance is not lost, because if you have the chance to look at most of our strategic plans, you will realize that this issue of digitalization is very high, on the agenda of all the tax administrations. And the answer is very simple. We cannot achieve operational efficiency and effectiveness in the absence of these technological solutions. But now the issue here is, if you want to deploy them, at what cost? That's where the million-dollar question is. For a lot of the tax administrations, we operate based on subvented, funds. And if we have to handle this based on our own, funds that are subvented, it would take a huge chunk of those subvented funds, and it will leave us with no options in terms of addressing, other areas of tax administration. And this is where EBIT, ECOWAS, and the other development partners really have to partner and collaborate with the tax administrations so that you assist us in this digitalization drive. There is no way that the revenues can be increased, the services can be delivered in the most efficient and effective manner if these solutions are not there. So therefore, the donors really need to assist by way of, providing funding, by ensuring that those, issues of technological solutions that are captured in our strategic plans, there is adequate funding that is provided for them. Thank you very much.
Report on Action 1, when no concrete measures were recommended. Though these measures are far from perfect, they do represent a first step taken in establishing a level playing field between digital providers and traditional ones, with facilitating tax compliance for smaller taxpayers, whom the CAT commenced, as I said, some years ago, with the introduction of different measures of the new measures to distribute rules foreseen in the 24 double tax agreement signed by Tyson. From January 2016 onwards, income derived from advertising services. Later, in 2017, the aim was to specifically address the taxation of digital. In January 2018, more general rules were introduced, though limited to two types of digital business models: passenger transport and the transmission of audiovisual content. Adopt taxation of those who operate within this platform start withholding the driver's tax and providing information on their activities to the Uruguayan tax administration to comply with their tax obligations. Collaboration has been the key for the whole Uruguayan experience from the solution. Indeed, not only is taking the legal framework relevant, but also to registration, documentation, and payments requirements. Namely, to present tax returns and make payments in US dollars. And of course, well, the third question, what lessons are there for Africa? Well, firstly, legislation, I think both domestic and agree, has to be updated when we import a measure. Secondly, I think dialogue operates. Business feedback may also help governments with the design of feasible measures. While digitalization has posed many issues, it has also opened a wide range of opportunities. Well, I think that's all. Merci, thank you for your attention.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think somebody's behind. Somebody's behind.
Sorry, let me speak. I'm behind you, sir. Hello?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to talk. My name is Engineer Silas Sukaka. I work with the National Information Technology Development Agency, one of the IT regulator sector in Nigeria. It is clear that use of technology or adoption of technology has brought about improvements in terms of service delivery with that clear effectiveness and efficiency. And that has led to a lot of turnover in terms of profits and revenue to organizations. However, this comes along also with some implications. For instance, there's mention of robotic tax. And I read about the reasons behind establishment of robotic tax by South Korea in 2017. It was as a result of realizing that there is job loss, increase in job loss in the students, so they imposed this robotic tax. And that has led to slow down of adoption of technology across various sectors because perhaps the tax was too high or unbearable to the provider. They feel, okay, let's go back to our conventional way of using the human model and other things. So the question now is, Africa, what measures are we trying to put in place to ensure that the tax regime we are trying to put in place on these digital services is not such that it stifles innovations? Because when there's low adoptions, definitely there will be low innovations. Mindful of the fact that Africa, our technology space is still weak, we require innovation, especially indigenous development and utilization of these applications. So what measures are there in place to? The second question is, yes, when we collect these digital taxes, for instance, if a robot is used to displace 100 people from the job, they lose that job, and there is a tax collected from this, what also provision is going to be in place to ensure that these people, they didn't suffer the job loss alone? The tax collected from the robot that displaced them, something directly goes to them or indirectly goes to them. So there should be provision to ensure that that is provided. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very good question. I think, so this goes to the heart of the conversation. While we're thinking about taxing the digital economy, I think maybe WATAF, along with ATAF, can also drive the development of a policy. I know that ATAF has this framework for digital services taxation, but we need to go beyond that in terms of looking at the broader economy first and foremost to ensure that whatever we impose is not coming in the way of innovation, because the world needs that to grow, needs that to develop. And if I go back in time, when they developed machines to do knitting, right? Even the Queen in the UK did not want to give them intellectual property right because they were afraid that a lot of people were going to be unemployed. There were days that people were hired to write books. So when you're writing a book, you use longhand, other people will copy it. When do you make 1,000 copies? The world was afraid that if you develop a printer, people will be unemployed. But the world has always found a way of getting engaged. I think we should be open to technology and innovation, not stop it, but at the same time think about how to creatively ensure that everybody pays their fair share of taxes, including even whether it's robots or artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Bom dia a todos. Portanto, eu sei que eu chamo Keta Baldé, representante da Guiné-Bissau. Eu sei que a língua portuguesa é uma língua oficial da CDO, mas não é frequentemente falada nos diferentes encontros. Portanto, voltando à minha intervenção, eu queria me dirigir ao primeiro painelista, que levantou muitas questões.
Directed at one of the panelists, what is existent in the technology involves every country in the world, especially the tax administrations, because we cannot decide to say that or decide to talk about our general budget, we have to bear in mind the level of economies, of our economies, which can be of a great concern. Once that so far that the function of they have to for the budget of the states up till now it has not been possible because there's a preoccupation that can that borders all of us. As according to the representative of the ECOWAS, since 2013, actually for all organizations of cooperation to develop the economy, even with the EU, involved in all these questions, inclusively with other regional organizations, that the forum of WATAF and that is WATAF, with the fiscal administration, with the tax administration, so that in what measure can we have a framework or an can it be for the digitalization for our tax administrators so that they can gather for our general budget. On this, there are two proposals that are the EU, that is the reformulation of the laws of tax laws, either to have or that the taxes where the companies have an interaction, or maybe there's actually a problem. The great problem is that there's a separation or disconnection between the place where it is created, the value, and the place where these values are also digitalized. The different types of companies don't have enough space. They don't have enough geographical limitation. For example, for the EU, proposed the first solution. The second is the creation of a provisional tax which up till now, and I would like to know, and so I am directing my question in the former generic, that all these problems that exist, and I would like to know if there's any alternative between these two alternatives that EU has, so that we can, so that from 2013 they can enter into, they can, if WATAF, if on the part of WATAF there's a solution for the equitable putting together of these laws. I hope I'm understood.
Peut-être qu'on va donner la parole. Le modérateur dit qu'il faut donner la parole à quelqu'un qui est au fond là-bas. Il y a un monsieur derrière là, et c'est une dame. Voilà, cette dame qui est en rouge. Après quoi, on vient par ici. Cher organisateur, est-ce que vous nous donnez 3 minutes, hein, on va finir. Est-ce qu'on peut lui donner le micro, hein, cette dame? Pouvez-vous l'aider, madame?
Somebody has the mic there.
Good afternoon. Okay, you can come up here.
Good afternoon. Adam Matkudu from FIRS. Yeah. My one is, taxing digital economy is a function of availability of data. And this data, their sources could be under our control, which we can define the structure and the elements we want to be transmitted. Some could be outside our control, in which the owners will be talking of one thing or the other, investing in the technology or the other. Now, bearing this in mind, the question of integrity of data is now an issue. For use, for decision making, there must be aggregation of this data. My question now is, what are the regional agreement recommendation on the safeguards to apply in this data aggregation for a single point of truth? Thank you.
So that he's very right, and I agree with him. So governments, even the tax authority at the moment, does not have control of all the sources of data. And without data, we're not going anywhere with all of this. So I think it's first recognizing the magnitude of the issue we have to deal with and being committed to making the investment. And I think it goes to the point that the previous speaker mentioned about how do you even invest? I do not think that tax authorities with their regular budget can invest in technology to an extent that will address the issues we're dealing with. So you need your Ministry of Finance. They need to make special budget. I was attending a program, before COVID-19 in the US, and this guy who was the commissioner for the tax authority for the state of Massachusetts was saying that they just got a budget of $100 million. At the time they got $100 million to invest, he said their technology was already bringing compliance at about 98% compliance rate. Yet they are still investing $100 million. So we need to make that investment being knowledgeable that for every dollar you spend, it's an investment. You get multiple of it. It's been proven everywhere in the world. But in the meantime, let's start with what we have. What agencies do you need to collaborate with? How can you make the data work? How can you address the concerns of stakeholders around confidentiality and so on and so forth, and then we can make baby progress and baby step progress towards the destination we want.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Still have the feelings and they have some questions to answer. Let's give them a few minutes so that we exhaust that and then we can go for lunch. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. With your kind permission, I'll remain on the established protocol. My name is Jane Rose Kuzugwe, an Assistant Director with the Federal Inland Revenue Service, Nigeria. Since the presentation by Mr. Taiwo Aladili, I've been pondering on my head about what he mentioned about Mr. Google being able to help us with our security challenges. I don't know if you are agreeing with me that the whole of West African sub-region is suffering so much of instability and insecurity, which is as well affecting the revenue collection level. For instance, in Nigeria, we have just introduced tax promise, but in areas like Sambisa, nobody is talking about accessibility to internet and doing taxation, responding to tax obligations. Same in somewhere like Enugu State, where for days people don't even go to their businesses on the basis that there is stay-at-home order. Such people, you begin to see that the revenue collection is already very adversely affected. So for me, it's a bit important that we can use opportunities like this to discuss the possibility of affecting the security and instability challenges of the West African sub-region, to see how that can help us with increasing the revenue, more so when we are talking about digitalization now, the grassroots where internet remains challenges and all of that. Thank you.
Comment, even though Google has a lot of information, they will never share it. Even the American government has not been able to force them to share data that they don't want to share. So I have once in a while I get a report from Google that tells me everywhere I've been. So even here now, they will still send me the report that I came to Abuja. They will tell me the new places I visited, because for most people you have to enable location so you can get a lot of services. Even when you switch off the phone, you wake up in the morning, the first thing you switch it on, and then they immediately know that this is where you woke up in the morning. So those guys just tell us the possibilities that are there. And for us to then think big in terms of how we design our approach, first to understand those business models and the way the world is really transforming, and then to see how do we link up, one, to make sure we don't stop innovation, but two, to collect the right amount of taxes from them. And by the way, technology is the best way to address insecurity if only we pay attention to it. That's what they really call intelligence. So there are countries where if you mention a word, something picks it up within the system, right? And those words are flat. So there's nobody who is going to do terrorism or anything. They will communicate. They can't do it all alone. And that communication is where you get intelligence from. That's why America can sometimes tell us what's going to happen in Nigeria, even when we don't know it, because they've invested a lot in those intelligence, and it tends to work for them. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think Doctor wants to add something to that question. Yes,
Thank you. Madam's concern is a very genuine one, but we have to understand the fact that there are layers of issues that have to be addressed before we talk of our inability to tackle insecurity. If we roll back to the days before the COVID challenge started, many of us were having meetings physically. But today we have meetings online, virtually. There was a day I attended about 5 meetings in 4 countries within the single day. If I were to be traveling even from Abuja to Lagos, I'm not sure how that is feasible. What I mean is that we have to invest heavily in the technology infrastructure that will help us to address the technology challenges. Once this is in place, we'll be able to match this with the issue of insecurity. For example, today we have a number of technologies around that we can deploy to actually track some of these terrorists affecting Nigeria and many of the countries in the sub-region. It's not peculiar to Nigeria. We have the same challenge in Mali, in Chad, in a number of the countries around us. So the challenge for us is for us to invest heavily in these technologies so as to reduce the impact of these crooks, fraudsters, and also terrorists in our operation. So the key challenge for us is, as policymakers, as stakeholders, is to look beyond the present situation, encourage our development institutions to seek for budget, seek for financial resources to invest in technologies that will help us to address the current challenges. Thank you.
Questions from the floor?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I am from Togo. I am in charge of a section on motor licensing. I have listened with rapt attention with what has been said. My question is to Mr. Taiwo. In his presentation, he mentioned that Google is not represented in most countries in West Africa, but is represented in Nigeria and Ghana. Therefore, we should actually move towards local enterprises who are in the digital economy section. We know that this kind of technology issues is a very big problem within the sub-region. Therefore, we should try and identify such enterprises, particularly in Togo, where we have difficulties to identify those who are in the digital economy. My question is therefore to know, does he have an approach or solution on how best to identify such local technology hubs that can help us to build our digital economy? Thank you very much.
So I like the question as well. I think, so if we start thinking about technology in terms of the entire governance system, then we can address that. So Estonia, for example, is even running a digital government, including you can be an e-citizen. So at the end of the day, there are 3 points that we need to focus on. When people make money, because that's what you're trying to follow, want to follow the money. When people make money, they either spend, save, or invest. Those are the 3 points. So if you're on YouTube and you're making money, somebody is transferring the money to your account. If I can't find the money where they transfer it, you spend it. And when you spend it, you use your card and then I track it, or you invest it. So if you start tracking those points, those value points, those income streams, expense points, you capture a lot of what you don't currently have visibility over. But we have to be intentional in how we do it. And the tax authorities, we're talking about government. You have the resources to hire the best people in town, right? So these same guys that are doing all these gig stuff, you can hire them, pay them money, and they'll do it for you. So you get intelligence and you get the money that you want. So whether it's Togo, whether it's Nigeria, whether it's America, I think the resources are available to countries to be able to do something and start from where they are. And then progressively, you get better over time.
Thank you. Doctor, you want to say something?
Okay. Pour la question qu'il a. Okay.
For the question you raised, it's a very
Thick-necked one, but we need to also understand that you need to develop the capacities of the tax management agencies in all the member states to be able to attract the entrepreneurs in the digital space. In the digital space, there is what is called scale without form. You have someone seated, for example, in Togo, he's seated in Kara. His clients are in Russia. He develops software in millions, he sells. There's no way you track it. How do you take the task on it? For example, in many of African states today, we have some very big numbers when it comes to internet earnings. Here in Nigeria, a good example is a musician called Davido. On YouTube alone, he makes millions of dollars as revenue. How do we tax this? There is a fellow that they call Sadio Mane for those who like football. I think he's one of the highest earning athletes on YouTube, not because he's playing football, but just being on YouTube, he makes a lot of money. How do we tax this? So all those internet entrepreneurs are seated around us. He may even be your neighbor, but his clients are not there. So he has a large-scale operation all over, but he doesn't have any firm. You get to his house, they don't even know he's a business person. So our challenge is for us to involve in capacity building for tax administrators all over the sub-region, invest in resources, invest in hardware that will help us to match them. As he has said, if it's possible, recruit technology experts. I'm an accountant, but you don't have to recruit someone like me. You can actually recruit technology experts, developers, to help you out. What are these guys doing? Once you have adequate information as much as he has, you'll be able to attract and also assess the tax appropriately and tax him as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Doctor. I believe we can wrap up there if there is no other question, because I was told that the lunch is ready. And also considering the fact that we have another panel discussions after the lunch. So we don't have to eat too much time, and then we also want to close a little bit early. We don't want to keep you here until 6 o'clock. So on that note, I want to take this opportunity on behalf of the presenter and my able panelists to say thank you very much for your time and attention. And we hope that you have learned a lot during this panel discussion, and that we can follow each other through the various contacts that we have. Life is not just going to begin here and end here. I think one of the most important things of this kind of gathering is to try to get contact to each other, so that even beyond here, we can still communicate and help each other in our own ways. So on that note, I want to say thank you very much, and thank you for your attention and time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Panelists, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. Thank you very much. You have learned something. When our colleague that from Guinea-Bissau was speaking, kept using the word numeric. The WATAF 10th anniversary gala night, which must start at 7. So we will try to do as much as we can between now and 5 o'clock, so that we can have 2 hours rest, so that we can come back in this same hall. They have to arrange this hall, turn into a gala night celebration hall.
Take the floor and give your presentation. Thank you.
Let me start by by saying good afternoon to everyone on the floor. I hope we had a good lunch and we managed to stay awake throughout the session. Please allow me to stand on existing protocol in view of the short time that we have left before dinner. My name is Chiaka Benobi, and the topic of my presentation is on new and emerging technology solutions for tax compliance. I am the group lead, Digital and Innovation Support Group of the FIRS. The outline of my presentation will be starting with a brief introduction on the subject, what the outlook for tax functions are, the emerging tax technologies capabilities, and then using FIRS as case study on what we are doing so far with regards to using new technologies to rethink our tax administration, the benefits and impacts of what we have deployed, then some of the challenges that we're also experiencing and how that is driving us to rethinking our strategy and redefining the skills and capabilities required to drive this value. I will then give a brief summary of what my final thoughts are. The brief introduction of emerging technologies. As you may all agree with me, emerging technologies is one of the key trends impacting tax functions. It is enabled by data and have become a continuous form of disruption to business, products, services, and experiences. It has also radically changed the way people consume content and communicate and access products and services. Hence, the disruption associated with it is causing businesses to continuously look to adopt new technologies such as Internet of Things, robotic process automation, blockchain, and artificial intelligence to evolve and be sustainable and stay competitive. This has resulted in newer tax laws because of the new ways of doing business, which deal with borderless value creation and big data. Therefore, the tax function must be ready to deal with this business transformation. Having said that, let's just look at what the outlook for tax functions or tax authorities are going forward. There are two elements involved on this, or two sides to it. One side is the professional content, dealing from executive insights to management insights to operations. And the other is the technology solution. It is the technical solution that is providing the advanced technologies and proven platform to the professional element to be able to analyze, give insights, get advice from data, and then advance analytics of the data. There is no one-size-fits-all for all tax technology solutions. However, for every emerging tax technology solution, they should have the following capabilities. One, digital identity. The solution must be able to support the tax administration in a secure and unique identification of taxpayers. The solution must also be sensitive to taxpayer touch points, enabling the engagement of taxpayers with tax administration processes as when necessary, such as through access to real-time support, like contact centers, websites, an app. Coincidentally, I was just having a discussion a few minutes ago with one of my colleagues on the necessity of having an app, an FIRS app, to enable interaction or more efficient interaction with taxpayers. So perhaps she can see that I agree with her that the app is necessary. Or any form of communication in more automated way to interact with the taxpayers. The solution must also be able to handle data reconciliation engine from different sources. And this is aimed at enhancing the accuracy and reliability of the data being submitted to the authorities. It must also have a tax rule management and application creating and distributing tax laws in administrable and verifiable formats to allow stakeholders to integrate tax rules within their own preferred system. There should be workflow and collaboration among the teams. There's entity management with global tax and regulatory compliances that will provide alerts, reminders, and escalations aimed at addressing compliance monitoring. There is also the not very popular one, the tax controversy management application. This is peculiar for companies operating in multiple jurisdictions for dispute resolutions. You need to go. Okay, that's all right. The next slide, please. So let me then share the FRS experience on how we are using new and emerging technologies to rethink tax administration. The FRS has brought innovation, convenience, and transparency. And if you look at these words, the acronym is ICT. So it's a way of saying we're applying ICT not just in information communication technology, but also in innovation, convenience, and transparency to the doorsteps of taxpayers in order to facilitate monitoring and enable ease of compliance. These initiatives are aimed to optimize FRS revenue generating efforts by creating an efficient tax system and providing quality service to taxpayers for increased revenue yield. The initiative addressed the challenges experienced by both the taxpayers and the FRS themselves. Some of the strategies we have embarked for our tax regime and revenue collection are first, the revision of the tax laws and regulations, intensive registration of taxpayers. For those of us who remember here, when we asked the taxpayers to go to their tax offices to update their details for ease of filing their VAT and CIT and other taxes, we were actually registering the taxpayers. But that was the quickest way to get the taxpayers to actually physically go to update to register their details. Just, you can liken this to the bank, going to your bank to also update your details, especially during the BVN capturing. We also embarked on a lot of stakeholder collaboration, both through Zoom, one-on-one, and through workshops. We established, I've heard a lot mention of the non-resident taxpayers. We also have established a department for non-resident taxpayers. We positioned our large and medium taxpayers. We automated our VAT administration for ease of collection at source and remittance. We're also reforming on the way we're administering tax clearance certificates and withholding tax. We also embarked on an extensive nationwide tax audit exercise. I must also mention our expansion of our treaty network and access to treaty benefits. I am proud to tell you today that FRS is, if not the first 3 organizations that have certified our AEOI Center to ISO 27001. This is not to 27001 standards. This is not an easy feat for any public service organization. So as it is today, we're able to exchange online data with the banks and then with the OECD countries through the Common Transmission System, popularly called CTS. In talking about introducing innovation, convenience, and transparency, this is what drove us to developing the Tax Pro Max solution, which is an end-to-end tax administration solution with the following modules: registration, assessment and filing, payment, receipting, reporting, issuance of tax clearance certificates, automated utilization of credit notes, audit, enforcement, and debt management modules. Now, not all of these modules have come into operation. However, the modules that have come into operations, we've not taken a big bang. We have been developing the modules one after the other. For example, registration, receipting, and tax clearance certificate modules became operational in June 2020. The assessment and filing and payment for VAT became operational in September 2020. The filing and assessment and e-payment for the CIT, as corporate income tax, became operational in December 2020. While the automatic utilization of the credit notes for CIT filing became operational this year, January 2021. The filing for withholding tax, withholding VAT, stamp duties, pay as you earn, personal income tax for non-resident taxpayers, and then corporate income tax for insurance, aviation, and shipping sectors became operational in Q3 of 2021. By Q3, we looked at August and September 2021. What has the performance of the Tax Pro Max been since deployment? This is the statistics. We've been able to register 253,000 taxpayers plus. For local receipts, we've generated 940,000, 941,000. For foreign receipts, 24,000. One might wonder why only 24,000 for foreign receipts. This 24,000 is from those that are actually paying their CIT, whereas the 940,000, 941,000 are actually receipts generated whenever a withholding tax or VAT are filed or remitted. For the credit notes local, we've generated 837,500, and for foreign, 36,179. Now, one might wonder, in view of the workflow, it is the receipts that eventually turn to credit notes. However, the reason we have this number for foreign credit notes, these are receipts or these are transactions that occurred long before we deployed the solution in June of last year. So they're just beginning to generate their credit notes. For tax clearance certificates, we've had 155,000 plus applications and have issued nearly 120,000. Some of the applications were rejected because they didn't conform with the application process, while some are still work in progress. What has the performance in collection been with regards to deploying this platform? Now, you have the ECFRS mentioned collection of over 600 billion in June, which is the highest that's been recorded since the COVID pandemic era. What you have on the screen is a breakdown of tax types and number of filers. For example, we have the corporate income tax. We've recorded 28,659 filers. Bear in mind that the usage started in June this year. And that's the figure with regards to how much we've generated so far. And then education tax, NIDL, VAT, CGT, it is the sum of this that gave up the 600 plus billion that EC spoke about. Now, it's interesting to know that it's only one filer that we have with regards to the personal income tax. Now, this is a British national who, of course, was staying less than 6 months in the country and had to file before he left the country. The payee, even though you have 61 for payee, what the MDAs are currently not doing, which is just the Army and Police, which the Federal Inland Revenue Service still collects, though they are remitting their payee, but they are not actually going online to file for the employees that they're doing this remittance on their behalf. So that's our next challenge, to engage and sensitize the payment schedule officers of the MDA so that they can actually start filing for these employees that are doing the payee deductions. Emerging technologies and revenue generation and tax compliance has also enabled FRS to activate their e-services portal, where taxpayers are able to register, file an assessment, pay for their taxes, we issue receipts, stamp duty processing and payment, and then application and issuance of the tax clearance certificates. We are also triggering VAT payments from source and remittance to our designated accounts in CBN. The sectors that we are currently working on has been aviation, power, telecoms, e-commerce, financial services, oil and gas, insurance, hospitality, and branded retail outlets. However, only 4 sectors have become operational, and those sectors are in aviation, banking, branded retail outlets, and cable and satellite TV. We've also enabled e-payment channels, at least 4 of them. This is InterSwitch, eTransact, Remitter, and NIPS. We're also exchanging information, like I mentioned earlier, with the OEDC through CMS, with Nigerian Customs, with CAC, and CAC is very key to us because all corporates that file with FRS first are registered with CAC. Now, during the course of registration, after the integration with CAC, the tax or the corporates now pay their stamp duties automatically and then remittance thereof. When the CAC registration documents are issued, they also issued with the TIN number of the corporate. Again, when a corporate that's been registered in the past comes to FRS to register to be issued a TIN number, we do an online real-time check verification with CAC for the company details and the validity of what the company has submitted before that taxpayer is registered. So what we have done with CAC, we believe that it's given us a lot of positives. Again, we've enabled we're on social media where we're engaging with the taxpayers. I already mentioned the website. Then there's Facebook, Instagram, etc., where we try to engage with the taxpayers. The benefits of this initiative are threefold. 1, to the taxpayers, 2, to us, the FRA, the tax authority, and then to the country. From the taxpayers, there's online filing of taxes, there's easy remittance, which they can do from anywhere they are. There's an improved service to taxpayers. There is also improved taxpayer education, sensitization, as well as brand management. What does it do for the service? It's promoting accountability in tax administration. There's a smooth and automatic exchange of data and information. The cost of enforcing compliance is reduced. There is enhanced staff efficiency. And for the country, is increased revenue generation capability, is promoting economic viability and growth of FRS and the Nigerian economy. It has also improved provision of an enabling environment for Nigerian businesses. And then for all, there's a reporting dashboard which is visible to the taxpayer, to the tax authority, and to the country. The reporting dashboard provides a powerful reporting and analytic tool, aggregating data from the platform and simplifying data reports for planning and decision making. The impact of this for revenue collection and tax compliance on non-oil sector can be seen from this chart. If you look at 2014, the gap between collection for oil and non-oil sector is less than 200 billion. That's the collection from oil is just less than 200 billion than non-oil. This was in 2014. In 2015, non-oil was nearly 200 billion more than oil collection. Then in 2016, there was a leap. Non-oil was about 1 trillion more than oil collection. That remained same in 2017, about 1 trillion. Then in 2018, oil peaked again with just almost same figures that we saw in 2014. Then in 2019, non-oil also went up, leaped by recording over 1 trillion more than the oil collection. Then in 2020, it was nearly 2 trillion more. That is non-oil. And then for the first 7 months of 2021, that is January to July, oil collection is at 709 billion, whereas non-oil is on 2.4 trillion. That's about 1.7 trillion more for the first 7 months of the year. Now, if you look at the compliance on collection trend, I'll just narrow it down to what the oil has been and what the non-oil has. If you look at the PPT, we are 61.8% to our target, whereas on company income tax, we're on 102.9% of our target. And then gas income is about 30% of our target, whereas stamp duties is almost 98%, so also is non-import VAT. So the total collection versus our target is about 72.25% of our targeted collection. This journey for FRS in adapting emerging technologies to tax administration and compliance hasn't all been foolproof. We've had our own challenges and our own issues. However, this shouldn't be a discouragement to tax authorities that are aiming to embark on this journey, because there is no alternative. However, it's good to know and learn from those that have done it before so that you know the pitfalls to avoid. First, there's the complex in use in the environment. It's heavy investment. Adoption has to be followed up with a lot of enforcement. Technology is seen as adding additional layer to what we're already doing. Power in Nigeria, was a big issue for us. It's still a big challenge for us. You require a lot of additional hardware together with the one being provided by the service provider. Again, depending on which way the tax authority decides to follow. We must not underestimate internal resistance to the change. As a matter of fact, if you put on a scale the external challenges and internal challenges, which one weighs more? The internal resistance weighs a lot more than external resistance. So we must be ready for it and then begin to engage and get buy-in of our staff as early as possible. From our experiences in deploying these emerging technologies and the challenges thereof that we faced, FRS began to rethink of its strategy. One, it may be too much to imagine a future where people enjoy paying their taxes. However, FRS imagines a future in which the experiences of paying taxes will become virtually painless by deploying the appropriate technology. Hence, FRS will focus on closing current gaps in the revenue collection system, while also identifying new untapped sources of revenue, especially in taxation of the digital economy. We heard a lot about digital economy this afternoon by the master himself, Taiwo Oyedele. FRS also recognizes that technology in itself will not change behavior. Current trends in tax administration modernization suggest that to achieve effective voluntary compliance, implementation of these technologies must be complemented with the adoption of compliance improvement models. Making FRS services available to taxpayers is imperative to ensuring compliance and increased revenue. The FRS shall continue to improve upon its technological advancement in order to effectively provide quality services to the taxpayers. FRS has recognized that a prerequisite to making real sustainable change is agile, enthusiastic, and continuous commitment, as demonstrated by the federal government of Nigeria with passing of the Finance Act 2020 into law in record time and international cooperation. And finally, FRS is ready and partnering with stakeholders for initiatives that will increase tax compliance, make transition to the reform agenda seamless, increase revenue generation, and accelerate Nigeria's economic growth. As we are rethinking our strategy, we are also redefining skills and capabilities.
Definiendo pericias y capacidades.
As we are rethinking our strategy, we are also redefining skills and capabilities required to drive value. It is no gainsaying that emerging technologies bring about a paradigm shift for tax administration. It is therefore imperative for tax employees to be proficient in the use of technology tools and platforms. Tax administration must have a mobile and digitally skilled workforce and require an organization-wide redesign, change management, and HR transformation in order to embed people's strategy with business outcomes for improved tax compliance. Let me now use in the environment its heavy investment. Adoption has to be followed up with a lot of enforcement. Technology is seen as adding additional layer to what we're already doing. Power in Nigeria, was a big issue for us. It's still a big challenge for us. You require a lot of additional hardware together with the one being provided by the service provider. Again, depending on which way the tax authority decides to follow. We must not underestimate internal resistance to the change. As a matter of fact, if you put on a scale the external challenges and internal challenges, which one weighs more? the internal resistance weighs a lot more than external resistance. So we must be ready for it and then begin to engage and get buy-in of our staff as early as possible. From our experiences in deploying these emerging technologies and the challenges thereof that we faced, FIRS began to rethink of its strategy. One, it may be too much to imagine a future where people enjoy paying their taxes. However, FIRS imagines a future in which the experiences of paying taxes will become virtually painless by deploying the appropriate technologies. Hence, FIRS will focus on closing current gaps in the revenue collection system, while also identifying new untapped sources of revenue, especially in taxation of the digital economy. We heard a lot about digital economy this afternoon by the master himself, Taiwo Oyedele. FIRS also recognizes that technology in itself will not change behavior. Current trends in tax administration modernization suggest that to achieve effective voluntary compliance, implementation of these technologies must be complemented with the adoption of compliance improvement models. Making FIRS services available to taxpayers is imperative to ensuring compliance and increased revenue. The FIRS shall continue to improve upon its technological advancement in order to effectively provide quality services to the taxpayers. FIRS has recognized that a prerequisite to making real sustainable change is agile, enthusiastic, and continuous commitment, as demonstrated by the federal government of Nigeria with passing of the Finance Act 2020 into law in record time and international cooperation. And finally, FIRS is ready and partnering with stakeholders for initiatives that will increase tax compliance, make transition to the reform agenda seamless, increase revenue generation, and accelerate Nigeria's economic growth. As we are rethinking our strategy, we are also redefining skills and capabilities. As we are rethinking our strategy, we are also redefining skills and capabilities required to drive value. It is no gainsaying that emerging technologies bring about a paradigm shift for tax administration. It is therefore imperative for tax employees to be proficient in the use of technology tools and platforms. Tax administration must have a mobile and digitally skilled workforce and require an organization-wide redesign, change management, and HR transformation in order to embed people's strategy with business outcomes for improved tax compliance and revenue generation. Let me now close by sharing my final thoughts on this subject on emerging technologies for tax compliance. One, technology advances is a key business enabler. The word enabler is very important to note, as sometimes developers in ICT seem to want to define the business rule for the business and not seeing ourselves as enabling what the business wants to be enabled. I think I mentioned that to the GTOG this afternoon. We had a small discussion around it. Two, emerging technologies has presented huge opportunities for tax administration, from automation of business processes to collection of information, application of artificial and business intelligence, stakeholder engagement, improved compliance, and immense contribution to economic development. The path to successful implementation of technology is complex. Sometimes requiring legislative support, effective design of administrative and technical procedures, and extensive consultation processes with key stakeholders. However, tax administrations contemplating the implementation of these technologies can leverage the growing body of experience. I thank you all for your attention and listening. Thank you.
It is a very elaborate journey that the Federal Inland Revenue of Nigeria has traveled. And through the presentation, I hope the other countries present with us this afternoon would also be interested in sharing your journey. You've highlighted some of the success stories, and you've also come up with some challenges and how. So in the interest of time, I will move to give the floor to my great friend Raul Zambarano. Zambarano, kindly take the podium.
Boa tarde, bonjour, good afternoon. I will speak in English, and, or should I say something that resembles English. So, Duncan, my dear friend, if you cannot listen to me loud and clear, don't blame the communication, just blame my accent in the English language. But I'll try to do my best, so thank you. I shall start thanking WATAF, and particularly Babatunde and FIRS for having us here. SIAT, as you may know, is a sister organization with WATAF, and we have 4 African member countries, Nigeria being one of them, so it's a common member. It's an honor to be here for the first time. Thank you very much. As I can see you with your phones, I bring mine also, and as our colleague from PwC this morning told us, some companies there know that you are with me right now, and probably they know that we are talking about taxes in the digital economy. So you cannot deny it. You will be blamed for it. This is just to keep track of my time. This morning, the secretary told us about some taxes, income tax, VAT, and a possibility of a digital service tax. And the ministry told us about some of the expectations, difficulties, negotiations, compromises that the direct part of those taxes need to go through. And we are in that process within the inclusive framework under the lead of the OECD, and we might get somewhere in the near future. But the other part that the Secretary mentioned has to do with VAT, the consumption taxes, indirect taxes. And there is little discussion there. So I will try to give a presentation, and will ask my colleagues there to put the presentation on the screen. And since we are in this environment, in this after or post-COVID situation, we will try to go beyond digitalization and IT and go to telepathic technology, and I will ask my friend to advance in the presentation. So, what we are talking about is that there is no real discussion in terms of consumption taxes, indirect taxes. The destination principle is accepted and is something that we can start working with. So the thing is, what we are talking about is the difference between being in a jurisdiction or not having any presence in the jurisdiction. And I will try to very rapidly go through it with some practical examples. Remember that if a company is operating with a physical presence in a jurisdiction, that company is subjected to the same regulations as all other taxpayers in that jurisdiction. So basically, we'll have to go through the processes and take advantage of these very nice features of the new system of FIRS. But if the company has no presence at all, then, and that is the idea behind that smile, sunny face in the second part of that slide, is that those companies will operate with no physical presence and will not only not provide the revenue the country needs, but also will compete in, with a different set of rules in a more advantageous situation than companies operated in the local. So to help us understand this, I will bring you some practical examples. First, what we are not talking about. There you can see a screen capture of an operation managed through the internet. Everything was done over the internet. The delivery of food, the menu was presented over the internet, the request, payment, everything. But that is a company that is within the jurisdiction. And if you take a look in the bottom of that screen, you will see ITBMS, which is the name of VAT in Panama, where I live. And so that company operates in the same market under the same rules as any other company because it has physical presence in the jurisdiction. So we are not talking about that. It's regardless of the fact that this company operates with a lot of technology. So this example is a very well-known company that operates on the streaming service. And well, in many cases, they don't have any presence in the jurisdictions. And if you see the information about those payments, there is no VAT or VAT-like tax being collected under that operation. And they compete, for instance, with local cable companies that make investments that have to collect VAT from the local customers, and that some of those customers might choose to move towards a streaming company, abandoning the local business, and we, at the country, will not get the revenue, and also the local company will compete in a more disadvantaged position. It's not only a matter of choice, the tax that is not being collected might also contribute. Some of these companies are very well known, like this one, but the next example here is a company that works in the streaming of content and movies, but a specialized type of movie for intellectuals, for those that are into that kind of stuff, but it is not very well known. So many have never heard of that company, but they can operate in a jurisdiction without any physical presence. So there are different things like web hosting. Here we see a company that offers a web hosting capability. They operate with no physical presence, and they compete with local shops that could rent physical servers or cloud services that are well known. This can compete with this other service that you see there is a very well-known company, one of those companies that will know that we are here, that you are here with me, and the cloud services provided to either individuals or businesses. So we have some examples here, and I will go through them rapidly. Just there. Here we see one that I will invite you to take a look. This is a digital good. It's a book. It is not streaming. You are buying the good. It was mentioned this morning. But take a look at the payment. You see 1 credit. It is not euros. It is not dollars. It is 1 credit. It's something that the company manages itself. So you are paying with credits. Those credits can be acquired through different means, including buying a type of gift cards from that company while you visiting another country, for example, or by points you earn by using services or buying things within this company or other companies. So that is not money exchange, but that operation should be subjected to consumption taxes, VAT, if that is the case in a jurisdiction. So we can move over there. The majority of these transactions operate through credit card transactions or debit card with companies that operate outside of the jurisdiction. But some, let's move, operate through a different payment process. Like this one, this is collected through Apple, a second company, a third company that provides services. So the company that is providing the services is not collecting the money. Or the next one that you see, a very well-known payment service, PayPal, that is used to make the payments. And finally, here we see the receipt of that transaction, of that digital book that I mentioned before. If you see the amounts below is 000, it was paid with a credit. And that is interesting because we shall reflect a little bit in a later slide about those transactions. So, and finally, the last example here is using something that was mentioned also this morning, the use of cryptocurrencies for payments. In this case, it's a service that might or might not be legal in different jurisdictions, but that are being used, cryptocurrencies are being used for those payments without a lot of knowledge of tax administrations even possible. And just a quick comment about this. There are very different approaches to handling that kind of situations. We have some countries that are banning the use of cryptocurrencies, while other countries are openly adopting them for even as a substitute of the local currency. So very different approaches there. So what to do? And this is key. I mentioned there is no discussion that in terms of VAT, the destination principle is accepted, so the country where the market is should get those taxing rights. It is not as simple as we would like it to be, because it is not always easy to define where the country who has that right is located. And I will use a very simple example. Remember that a streaming company, very well-known streaming company that we mentioned very early. In practice, when you travel abroad, you are able to access that account from the different country. You change from one market to the other. And in your house, at home, someone might still be using that service. I will be using here in Nigeria. So what country has the right to those taxing rights is something that should be understand and be very clear for all parties. So what we can do is, and we have been working with colleagues from the OECD, the World Bank, and the Inter-American Development Bank in creating a set of guidelines to implement the indirect taxes in the digital economy and how to collect them. That means establish a simplified regime, a special regime that would allow taxpayers operating with no physical presence to register themselves from abroad, file tax return on a simplified manner from abroad, and facilitate the tax administration job through a process of risk management. In some parts of the world, and particularly in Latin America, there are some countries that opted for a different scenario, different alternative, which is to establish a withholding mechanism in the means of payment. So the credit card transaction, the operators of the credit card would be responsible to establish a withholding equivalent to the VAT rate on all operations to those taxpayers that operate outside of the jurisdiction and collect those taxes. And it is a good option. And in my personal opinion, we should work in trying to implement both the simplified regime for those taxpayers that would like to comply with that option, and as a second choice, or for those that would not or could not comply, have the withholding mechanism in place. The withholding mechanism in place has some deficiencies, as we need the banking sector to cooperate with us, and we need to precisely identify which taxpayers would be subjected to that withholding process. So the list of the very well-known companies, the large ones, is easy to identify and to pass to the banks and credit card operators. It will be probably a couple of hundreds, 200 companies in the world. But those other operators, the yoga instructor, the specialized cinema streaming company, those will be more difficult. So in our opinion, having a simplified mechanism in place plus the withholding mechanism would be the best option. So in that sense, here I will not cover this because of time, but it's just an invitation. We made a study, it's published in our site, in terms of revenue, the potential of the consumption taxes in the digital economy in the Americas. So you can visit and take a look. It will clearly be an example of what you could expect in Africa. It's publicly available, so you can query. And you will have the presentation so you can see those figures. Let's move. So in SIAT, what we did is, with the support of the NORAD, the Norwegian Cooperation Agency, we created a software tool that will be available to all tax administrations that would like to use it, not only SIAT members. So any tax administration that would like to use the tool would have access to it, and that would facilitate that companies operating in the digital economy from abroad a country with no physical presence in the jurisdiction could register in a simplified way, file tax returns in a simplified way, file information or about the transactions when needed, and that means it's probably not very interesting for a tax administration to get information of every single transaction in terms of a streaming service, but might be interesting to know if, for instance, a company rents or facilitates the rental of property, and that would be an indication of local income tax that would be very interesting for the tax administration to have. We build a system with these characteristics. It can work on-premise within the servers of the tax administration or in the cloud, and it is agnostic in terms of the cloud. It will work in any of the major cloud operators. It is highly parameterizable, so it will, since, as the lady mentioned, no hat fits all, there are a lot of parameters that will facilitate the implementation in a jurisdiction to a different jurisdiction with the particularities of each country in those senses. So it has two interfaces for tax administrations and taxpayers, and operates over the web or through web services, or large companies can automate the process. So instead of going online and filing the returns each month, they can put inside the ERPs the capacity to file the tax return every single period. It is multilingual to support more than one languages, and it will eventually become an open source product. So we will very rapidly go through a lot of screenshots of that application, so you can take a look at that. Please. So we see here the taxpayer portal, and see that it supports multilingual, and it allows the implementation of a second factor to guarantee the identity of the taxpayer, and a dark interface. Please move forward. Then the registration process, which is set by parameters, so we can establish which fields are required, the location in a map, the taxpayer identification number in the country of residence, contact persons, the type of operations, the obligations that would be required. Generally would be VAT, but if some jurisdictions has a second consumption tax, for instance, at the municipality level or at the state level, it could also be parameterized within the system. And you can upload scanned documents. So then the return filing, which is very interesting, is also multilingual. So one taxpayer in Germany can see the tax return and the process, the interface in German, while other would use English or maybe Chinese, depending on where that taxpayer is located. Here we see the taxpayer selecting a period and filling the data until the process is complete every single month. The system has an inbox functionality, so the tax administration could interact with the taxpayer, and it is API ready. So let's move on. The tax administration portal is the parameterization, and the first thing we see is that the user also can use different languages. Probably that's not the case, but there are some countries that have more than one language in place, so it's also a second factor for the user. Then the tax administration portal has an audit log, so every single transaction is recorded, and any modification to the system can be analyzed to understand when and why it happened. So let's move a little quickly, please. Here, we are not going into details here. We will see that the welcome screens is also parameterizable, so we can put the logo of the tax administration and set the text that identify the regulations or the acts that are mandatory, and in each language that is being used, that would be also available. The system has a lot of catalogs, and I will go fast until we reach the last, because I'm trying to meet my time. So there is very interesting thing in terms of form maintenance. We have the ability to pre-fill the tax return with information from the system. That means as soon as the taxpayer provide the information, the TIN, or enters into the system, the name of the taxpayer is known, any previous credit is also known, there is computations and check-ins, and very interestingly, the possibility of having web services to get information for a second system. For instance, a tax rate from the central bank, or a conversion rate of money, if that is the case, and it is required. So we can have that. Let's move towards the end. 3 more minutes, Duncan. We have some statistics available. All those things are within the system that can be used. Here, the one before. And the implementation, it works in all those cloud systems there, and with one of those databases. Some are required licenses, some are open source, and that is a choice of the tax administration to select which database will be used. And finally, the questions you might have. So can it be used if the tax administration is not from a CIAT member country? Yes, it can. I also mentioned that. How much it costs? It's free. The solution is free. But since it has to run over something, you will need either the physical machines or a cloud services, plus you might or might not need a software license depending on the database that you will use. But from the software itself, it has no cost. You can set it up yourself. Yes, that's true. Unfortunately, we know that not all tax administrations have enough IT capabilities of doing that by their own. So we will provide some online tutorials and things like that to support that, and maybe, depending on the ability, hopefully our colleagues from the FIRS will help any other WATAF member country if you decide to adopt the system in the future. There is an email address of the project manager that if you are interested, you can query to get more information. So thanks, obrigado, merci, and thank you, Duncan, and all of you for your patience.
Where taxpayers can be required to register in that jurisdiction or to have an entity to represent them in that jurisdiction. But I think he has also emphasized that we need to have a simplified registration process for this opportunity for revenue administrations who are interested. I think this is a discussion we really need to follow up. These are very nice publications. Some of us have gone through it. It's very informative, although it's meant for the American, but you find areas of commonalities that can be relevant even in our jurisdictions in Africa. So Chiaka, with the few remaining minutes, we are going to open the floor for intervention input. Thank you.
Indeed, I'm already here for you to help you take those questions. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have opened the floor for a few questions. Si vous avez des questions,
if you have questions or comments or observations, please, you can kindly raise your hands. Okay.
Director of Planning, Research and Statistics, Federal Revenue Service. My question goes to Madam Chaka, the lead presenter. In your presentation, you did mention the benefits of implementing this emerging solution, emerging technology, that's the tax pro max. But I observed that you emphasize comparison between the non-oil taxes and the oil taxes. Yes, the non-oil taxes, the difference between the non-oil taxes and the taxes can fluctuate depending on different kind of conditions that may exist in the economy at a particular time. But from your observation of the results of implementation of the tax pro max and your comparison between the actual collections, especially the non-oil taxes, between now, from comparison from what is happening now and what was happening before, can you notice any significant difference that can be attributed to the implementation of the tax pro max, given that from our experience, the non-oil taxes have been growing over the years, despite all without the implementation of the tax pro max. So if non-oil taxes are growing now, can you attribute them actually to the implementation of tax pro max? Is there any way you can single out and say this growth is as a result of the implementation of the tax pro max? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. Do we have another question?
Once again, my name is Agboro Michael from ICPC. My question is to the presenter. Let me thank her for her presentation. I'd like to state that some countries in the West have exploited machine learning and artificial intelligence to pre-populate tax returns using historical data and third-party data. And this has led to increase in tax collected and also in spotting red flags such as tax avoidance and evasion. So my question to FRS and WATAF members is, are we using this method to pre-populate the tax returns that are to be filed by these companies as a proactive means of increasing tax collection? Then my second question goes to, I can't get his name, but the white man who just spoke.
Mr. Raul Zambrano.
Okay. My question is, assuming I travel to the United States, I bought a car and I paid VAT on that car, and I'm given a credit, and I use the credit to purchase something online. Am I expected to pay VAT a second time since it has already been VATed? The credit I used to purchase, I've paid VAT already.
Thank you. That's two questions.
Thank you. As a follow-up to his question, is the FIRS system, is it integratable with other systems in order to pre-populate tax returns? Two, is it on mobile devices to make processes more simpler? And my next question goes to our colleague. I mean, in Liberia, we integrate our platforms with, say, the business registry, the central bank, the system at the Ministry of Finance. Is this system also integratable with other stakeholders, say, of government if we want to have access to it? Thank you.
Okay, so over to you, ma'am.
The first question is with regards to the oil and non-oil, the trend in the oil and non-oil collection that we charted, if that has any direct impact from implementation of Tax Pro Max. Now, the implementation of Tax Pro Max is just one of the emerging technologies, and we just use that as a case study or a sample of what FIRS has done with regards to deploying emerging technologies. So emerging technologies is not just speaking about Tax Pro Max, it's looking at all the various initiatives, and that's why I said these initiatives. One of those is, and how is that impacting non-oil collection, is the auto deduction of VAT from source and remittance thereof directly to FIRS CBN account. Now, even over and above that, if you look at our collection also on stamp duty, with regards to our versus what our target is, we're almost at 90%, and that is really enabled by technology. In the past, before we deployed these various platforms to deduct stamp duty at source, we haven't been achieving that level of performance in collection of stamp duty. And Tax Pro Max has a direct impact on the collection of stamp duty with regards to the MDAs, where stamp duties are now, 1% of stamp duties are now being automatically deducted for contracts or contracts that have been awarded. So with regards to stamp duties, the answer is yes. With regards to VAT deduction at source, the answer is partial because it's also talking to other type of technologies that the service has deployed. On the second question on, I think I understand that to be application of AI in populating returns. That is not currently happening. However, what is currently happening is that FIRS is looking at other data sources and using that to validate the validity and the transparency of what the taxpayer has declared. Now, going forward, we have it in the plan that we will have auto-population of declarations when the time comes. We would have also integrated with these other data sources before that can happen. So it's still work in progress. We haven't actually finalized. We are still in the process of implementation. So what we have presented is the status to date of what we are currently doing with new and emerging technologies. Thank you.
If I may complement, there are many tax administrations that are offering the pre-population of tax returns, particularly on direct taxes, especially in individuals. But there is we in SIAD, we think that it is a trend that in the future we will see that happening more and more. I want to share with you the experience in terms of VAT in countries that have implemented electronic invoicing that are pre-filling the VAT tax returns every single month. In the case of Chile, of all VAT taxpayers, and with an acceptance rate of the proposal that the tax administration offers the taxpayers of 94%, which is almost everyone. So it's very interesting and very successful. Going back to the question, well, first, indeed, the system, the DEC tool, is designed to operate in two very different modes. The one as a standalone solution that can operate completely isolated, independent of any other system in a jurisdiction. And for instance, one country in Latin America that is implementing the system right now is using this approach. Why? Because it is the fastest way. It is the easiest way to implement the system. Basically, it runs by itself. It generates its own numbers. And later, the integration of collection will have to somehow manually complete it with whatever tax core system is being used in that country. The second alternative is to integrate or to make the DEC tool interoperate with the tax administration core tax systems, for things like the registration of taxpayers that will use a valid tax identification number in the jurisdiction. And why this could be interesting? Because that taxpayer might not have a physical presence in a jurisdiction right now, but that taxpayer might decide in the future to come to the country, and in that case, that taxpayer might keep that tax identification number in the future, also to integrate different elements that can be used to populate some fields, not all fields of those tax returns, but some fields, or other elements like even some workflow possibilities like approving an amendment return or things like those. And in terms of the second question, we have to remember that the majority of these transactions are facing directly the consumers. So there is no credit that will be claimed in those transactions. However, if it is not the case, if it is a VAT responsible company within the jurisdiction that is using this kind of services and that would like to claim the VAT involved in that transaction, then I'm not sure if it's said exactly as it translates from Spanish into English, a reversal of the subject would be required so that the company in the country would prepare an invoice to itself and collect the VAT. And eventually, in the end, we will have some transactions that will be taxed twice, one in the country and one in the seller country, and that unfortunately will be unavoidable. But in the majority of the cases, that will be handled that way.
Thank you very much, ma'am and sir. We have one last question coming from Mr. Matthew Bojumbola, who is the group lead, Special Tax Operations Group, FRS Nigeria. Please, sir, your question.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks, colleagues, for the wonderful presentation. Actually, I'm not asking a question, just want to clarify on the issue of pre-populating tax returns, just in addition to what our presenters have said. First of all, pre-populating tax returns works much well under income tax, and it requires a very conducive or appropriate legislative framework. It also requires a centralized point for capturing invoices. And for you to do that, you also need to make appropriate legislative intervention that enables the tax authority to pass invoicing through a central system, as ditto for payment systems and also accounting system, particularly accounting codes, which enables the relevant information to be captured and put into the pre-populated account tax returns. However, in an environment like ours, particularly in West Africa, where a lot of transactions are done by cash and informal businesses, and without the relevant legislative provision to mandate decentralized invoicing, payments, and accounting system, it is going to be like putting the cart before the horse. I think finally one other hurdle that would also be crossed for us to get there, we need to also create the relevant social environment, political environment for that. Some of us in Nigeria will recall a lot of shouts that goes about when BBN was introduced, and also when we were asked to link our NIN to our telephone numbers. All of these are conditions that must be in place for us to be able to move to the level of being pre-populating tax returns. I just felt that we need to have that education so that we don't think it's just only about computing or artificial intelligence. It's also about other necessary environmental issues, including legislation and political buy-in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Please, a round of applause for Mr. Bachumula.
Thank you so much, the MC, for guiding the Q&A session. I have no much to add. I think I've already had my interjection on the two presentations, but I would wish to appreciate so much Nigeria for sharing with us this tax program. I think it's a very innovative solution, and if I looked at the graph, they paint a very rosy picture. So we could look at that sort of direction. What Madam Chaka re-emphasized was compliance improvement models. And one thing that COVID has taught us is that we do not need to distrust our taxpayers so much, because this time we've been receiving information digitally, and for some reason we still manage to get our taxes. And that's the kind of trust we need to build over time. In fact, from where I stand, we now need to move the compliance improvement model further, maybe to incorporate things like cooperative compliance, which will provide us with a solid framework of engaging taxpayers on a trust basis. Now, coming back to our colleague from Asiata, Mr. Raul, I think SIAT has a capacity of doing a number of research in various aspects of taxation, and they've been doing it before. So the cooperation between our organization and SIAT need to be more strengthened so that we can learn. When I visit some of the Central American countries, apparently you will find they are more or less peers with our African countries, and therefore it means we've got a lot of commonalities, not only in the tax area, but even in economic and social aspects. So let us strengthen this cooperation, and I think from it we will really gain more. So without much ado, I would want to release my panelists, and I hope we have not spoiled the appetite for the evening, and if we've done so, then we will be forgiven. So thank you so much. Back to the master of ceremony.
Thank you very much. Round of applause for our panelists and Mr. Duncan Oduru, who is in the United Kingdom. Please, Mark. Photograph. We'll invite Executive Secretary and Chairman WATAF to join them. Thank you. I think they deserve a round of applause. Thank you, Chaka. Thank you, Bob. And Duncan, can't see your face for whatever reason.
Don't worry.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. come to the end of today's proceedings. We had quite an engaging opening ceremony. We've had two very enlightening sessions. I think we deserve another round of applause. Thank you for all of you that made it happen. This evening, as you all know, that WATAF will be having a special gala evening and 10th anniversary celebration with an award night. And it's going to happen in this hall. And so that's why we will close shortly. And please, we will plead that we've had quite an engaging day, but let's return here at 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock this evening, it will...
The chairman of the network of tax organization, Massive, you remember we had conversations on that. The idea of going to buy official softwares that will make you to keep going back and forth in terms of renewing licenses, or you want to train people implementing it, can be better dealt with if the tax administrations can put in place necessary incentives to retain staffs who have ICT experience. When I interrogated SEAT on the development of the tool that they have, I was surprised that they didn't go to meet someone, the company there. It was something done internally, and that's remarkable. And the FRS will also shows us that we have the capacity to go that route. And because we are dealing with specialized information, sensitive information, processes that are time-bound, we need to think more in terms of bridging that gap. So today we'll be having another exclusive session, which will be the rounding up of the Tuesday high-level policy dialogue. I can assure you, with the people we have on the panels today, you will have an exciting time. So I welcome you on board as we proceed to start today's presentations. Thank you for listening.
Which is going to focus on taxation in a digitized economy, challenges, prospects, and the way forward. So to moderate the session, please, it's my pleasure and honor to welcome the moderator, Mr. Tei Gonzi, who is Commissioner Trade, Customs and Free Trade, the ECOWAS Commission. Please, let's welcome him with a round of applause. You can move on and give us time to speak for me. Let's encourage him. One applause to him. The paper presentation will be done by Mr. Anthony Mulanda, to be done virtually, International Taxation Experts, African Tax Administration Forum, WATAF. The panelists are, virtually we have Dr. Wilson Pritchard, CEO, International Center for Tax and Development. Virtually also joining us is Dr. Abdallah Al-Nakia, Managing Partner Al-Nakia and Associates. Physically, nous avons Dr. Abubakar Nakanabo from Burkina Faso. I guess he's here. Please, let's welcome Dr. Nakanabo. Vous êtes bienvenue. Virtually also joining us is Ms. Chinai Mukumba, Policy Research and Advisory Manager, Tax Justice Network Africa. And we have a representative of the Global Policy Center who will be joining us virtually. So at this point, I'm going to hand over the microphone to the moderator. Donc, à vous, Monsieur Tei Gonzi, pour la modération.
Je voudrais, à l'entame de mes propos, vous présenter nos excuses pour n'avoir pas été présent au début des manifestations. Mais rassurez-vous, nous n'avons rien raté puisque nous étions en communication serrée avec le directeur de la sécurité et de l'Union douanière qui était toujours avec nous. J'étais à une réunion de la CEDEAO pour représenter son Excellence, le président de la commission de la CEDEAO.
Commissioner Sibo, on behalf of the ECOWAS chairman, to wish us all the best on the 10th anniversary. The ECOWAS Commission is very happy to be part of this meeting of a very important thematic area. And for us being a moderator this morning, I have listened and since yesterday, the kind of biography most of the panelists have and also the presenters, and I therefore think that we have with us a very good assemblage of panelist members who will help us to understand what is being done on the thematic area of taxation. We are actually looking at the perspectives of the future in terms of taxation, particularly as touching the digital economy. Ladies and gentlemen, the taxation of the digital economy is an issue that is of current concern in our economies today. And for this reason, we have seen that it's very important with e-commerce that is a subject matter of today, and we can no longer be left behind. We therefore have the opportunity now to be amongst very important experts, and therefore we'll be getting a rich presentation from them today in terms of e-commerce. We will be looking at adverts online, payments online, and also the different participatory platforms that we have online that have taken over the world of today with the development of new technologies. The OECD group is also very important in these emerging discussions, just like in matters of the sale and buying of services which are done online, and therefore they develop specific methods to receive in real-time taxation. And that has actually led to the digitalization of the services and particularly touching taxation policies. The issue here is to know if the taxation regulations internationally, notably the establishment of permanent or that has to do with the understanding of how to manage online commerce or trade in terms of the digitization of the economy, as we can currently see, which has actually come to us now as part of the offshoot of the COVID-19 pandemic, which the working online and different incidences of the different functions which are linked to them, of which taxation itself forms a very big aspect of it, should be a matter of concern to all our economies. We are going to call on all of us here to concentrate on taxation, which is our thematic area, and make sure that we'll be able to come out of this meeting with the different means that will help us in order to fight the different obstacles and challenges that actually can come on the way, so that we can continue to evolve with other clients given the pandemic situation. Secondly, we should, at the end of our exchange here, with the different contributions that we are going to get, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be able to have the opportunity to have a synthesis that will give us some of the different indicators and recommendations or resolutions that we can take home in order to contribute to actually handle appropriately e-commerce. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to hand over the floor now to the different panelists to actually, first and foremost, to the presenter to make his presentation, and at the end of this session, as has been indicated in the program, we'll be able to listen to this panelist who will take us into deep discussions from which we will actually reap from their very precious contributions. I would like to thank all of us on behalf of the ECOWAS Commission. Thank you very much for listening.
As you know, this is a virtual. We have people going to be presenter online. It is eager to hear from you. So, please, you have the floor. Eager to hear what you have to say. Please, let's encourage the round of applause. Over to you.
Okay, still fine. You can share the screen from that side. So. My name is Anthony Munanda. I'm Technical Advisor International Tax in WATAF. I've seen my critics, but these 6 pillars are critical, and I'll focus on those for the purpose of Outlook magazine, which collects tax collection. Yeah. I've said the importance of African is there. And some of the things countries have done with legislation and policies, of course, to get the benefits from the extractive sector. There is also make it very difficult for highly digitalized businesses. They will require residents to create a kind of physical presence to be able to do work online. So that as companies that are physical presence, businesses. So that makes it very difficult for most countries to get to certificate and work which has been done, have implemented or are contemplating to implement, then choose are important because we see same problem present, so that even if you want to post VAT, there are potential challenges for those companies in the continent and elsewhere, where countries enacting legislation, some are not yet being operationalized. By encouraging these countries, this, of course, is leveraging on experiences which have been seen elsewhere, particularly in 2017. One key thing which we observed as ETA is that countries with mind transaction could be in scope. The other important issue are fully integrated within the tax administration, and also that integration should also include economic transactions. And therefore, technology transactions are slightly different. So, largely a search engine users then see. The users, this diagram raises several issues. One of those issues is companies, where revenue come from for the purpose of a company with a jurisdiction outside Africa, or is we'll see some of important issues in the next slide. Thank you very much. The other issue of information which has been put together about users, so that there is really targeted to certain consumer group of consumer teams to be able to understand the behavior of those customers. So you and I users will be sold to another digital platform, or maybe will be the jurisdiction of the current framework. Next slide. So similar issues arise multiple using a digital platform to access those goods and pay. The supplier will make price there where you track locate that source, and the issue is how do you allocate part of the income because of possible different locations. Next slide. The new value streams we see in highly digitalized businesses, scale without mass, which enables this company to participate.
I would like to not take on giving the details contained in his presentation. I would therefore like to say that the presenter is an expert on the subject, as has been seen, and has given us his very rich knowledge matters that he has discussed. Having said so, we're going to hand the floor to one of the panelists who is here with us. We're going to ask him to introduce himself and go ahead to make his also like the other panelists to be on the look. Thank you very much, the moderator. Thank you, everybody, for my participation. I am Abubakar Makanabu. I work with the Burkina Faso Revenue Service. I am the chair of the Technical Committee on Taxation. It's a pleasure for me to be given the floor to actually my own. It's a very interesting subject to us all. And just like the presenter stated, we are in a situation where the text as conceived at the international level, they are actually conceived, the text that needs to be reviewed based on the current situation. Before you actually get to deal with a country, you have to physically come and establish yourself there to understand the environment. I have already said so. Currently, we have the digitized platforms that can actually make one to intervene in the country. Physically coming. Therefore, the notion of physical establishment, previously known, or even in the national legislation, it's something that has to do with the current situation of things for now. We know digitalization giants like Google, Facebook, most of them are very well present in our different countries, but they don't have any physical presence. How do we go ahead to actually make sure that we tax them in spite of their absence physically in our different countries? Finally, it is not just a problem of developing countries, but also developed countries too are facing the same challenge. First and foremost, we know that we should first and foremost know what the challenges are and head to look for solutions. Works are being done. Currently, we are looking for a global solution to this problem. to be able to handle the situation appropriately. There has been an agreement from OECD side. It has two dimensions. First and foremost is to give a part of these benefits to the market jurisdiction to make the situation stable. If the company actually meets the conditions, then you are going to benefit of a part of the revenue that will be imposed or taxed. And the other dimension is the minimum rate. ECOWAS says 15%, African Union and through WATAF, that is African countries at 20%, because they demonstrated that taxation between 30 to 35% may be a little high. Therefore, taking 15% cannot totally help in the fight against tax evasion, because at 15%, if a country gets to correct that, may not attract enough investment, and therefore, if the African position actually look at the dimension of how we favor African countries first. And finally, it is something that has to do with the involvement of these countries, the whole taxation process itself. Since I already said that there are works are still on course, we should make sure that African countries are participate appropriately to know exactly the way things are for different countries should defend their different countries, but do you know that African countries have the same abilities, and that is why effectively we should, in the agreement that we are going to be committed to, what should we do to be done so that Africa can be account on its own resources that it can mobilize, rather than actually transferring the benefits that actually accrue from taxation abroad. This is what will not help our development, and therefore the involvement of all of us administration will be very, very important. The technicians are actually working hard on this, but if the politics is not there, it will actually not take us where we want to be. This is in a nutshell what I want to say. In the first case, when I'm called again, I'll intervene again. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Man on the list, in a summary, he has given us the essential what we need to do, the evolution that we are facing for now in terms of what we the taxation of the digital economy. Very naturally, this is something which we should actually do. Make sure that we create a potential framework that will actually back up anything we want to do in this direction. We will therefore give the floor to the next panelist. I would like to let us know that Dr. Wilson Richard, okay, he is not there. Then we'll pass to I would like to call on the next person.
Dr. Abdallah Ali.
We'll call on Dr. Abdallah Ali.
Vous avez la parole.
Okay, Dr. Abdallah Ali, you have the floor before we get back to the Wilson teacher. We may have to invite Madam Shenia Mekumba to take the floor.
I can see that your previous available. Or would you like me to continue? I'm happy to do so, but Mr. Pritchard is available. No problem, I can go ahead. So much for inviting us as Tax Justice Network Africa to be able to participate in this event. We are very honored to be able to contribute to these conversations. And thank you as well to Anthony. We really appreciate the work that ATAF does. I think that was a very clear presentation, very concise, and I think spoke to what you've been doing over the past couple of years in an effort to promote African interests. So the question that I was asked to speak to was, what is TJNA's assessment of the revenue impact of the OECD IF work on Africa when compared to developed countries, and also to suggest a possible direction for members. It's a really interesting question because as Tax Justice Network Africa, for those of you who may not know, we are a network of civil society organizations that have presence in 25 countries across the continent. And what we seek to do is two things. Number one, see the extent to which we can curb illicit financial flows. So this is money that is leaving the continent in ways that really shouldn't, right? Primarily being facilitated by multinational enterprises, right? So the extent to which we can close those loopholes, but then also secondly, see the extent to which we can promote the taxation systems, right? So that it's not citizens that are paying the brunt of the tax burden, but rather, wealthy elites, multinational enterprises, etc. We see this as key because at the end of the day, Africa is not a poor continent, and it makes no sense that we are so dependent on external financing when we have so much wealth within our own continent. So now, to speak specifically to the conversation, our view very much in line with what ATAF was saying. It is skewed very highly towards developed countries. And these are views that are shared not just by Tax Justice Network Africa, but a number of institutions that have come out to criticize what is being proposed by the OECD, the IF, the G7. And these institutions include ICRIT, for example, the Global Alliance for Tax Justice, and like I said, including ATAF. Specifically with regards to Pillar 1, the number that Anthony spoke to was that the rules are very complex. And part of the reason for being American countries do not have a level playing field at this platform. We have about 20 countries that are present within Africa that are present with OECD out of 134, and out of 134. And so even when you take a look at those proportions, African interests really are not in a position to be catered to the same degree as other countries. And also, when you think about the history of the OECD,
Recording in progress.
It was only later when there started to be outcry about the lack of inclusivity of these processes that African countries were then brought in. But even though Africans have been brought in, we are seeing that despite this, Africa being taken into consideration. And so, specifically, for example, ATAF, who is leading the charge on the continent in terms of submitting proposals, has done so on both Pillar 1 and Pillar 2, yet we have seen a lack of inclusion in terms of some of these processes. And so when you're talking about, who benefits from the current conversations, the point that Anthony made, when you take a look at the revenues that African countries would get under the Pillar 1, compared to what the developed countries would get. I mean, getting such a small proportion of residual profit, right, is something in and of itself. And so when ATAF proposes potentially 35%, and basically what they're arguing for, and we completely agree with it, this is not sufficient for countries where we can see significant activity taking place within the African continent. Under Pillar 2, I think this is also something that Anthony touched on. Similarly to what I said under Pillar 1, we see it as discriminatory against not even just Africa, but sort of global South countries in general. And when you take a look at some of the assessments that have been made with regards to the revenues that countries, particularly in the global South, gain, right? More often in almost all estimates, the global South is receiving a lot less, even though significantly by countries in Africa. And so what are our proposals moving forward? We are of the view that the current conversations need to be much more inclusive.
Madame, également, nous aurions poser plus de questions, peut-être vous permettre de compléter votre exposé, notamment en ce qui concerne la proportion dont vous avez parlé sur le pilier 1. On va voir si vous avez quelques propositions par rapport à ça. Et puis ensuite, en ce qui concerne la coordination nécessaire entre les États, là aussi, il y a un problème important. On voudrait savoir s'il y a sur votre sur des stratégies qui permettent d'établir une telle coordination à l'effet de permettre aux États de tirer profit. Étant donné, vous savez, la réalité dans le milieu où nous sommes, un peu partout d'ailleurs, parce que l'aspect de la souveraineté de l'État. Donc, pour parvenir à la coordination, certainement que ailleurs, on a trouvé des astuces un peu plus affectées et on voulait bénéficier de votre rapport pour aller dans ce sens. En ce je voudrais peut-être vous laisser 3 minutes pour le nécessaire aspect en attendant d'entrer dans le débat général.
The representative from the Global Policy Center to address the conference. The docteur Abdallah Lakiane est là. Nous appelons un représentant du centre de politique fiscale en Vienne pour nous rejoindre. I think we have somebody there.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a bit unsure about the time zone, but my name is Joy Werber Dubai. I am a research associate at the Vienna University of Economics and Business Global Tax Policy Center. And the question directed to me was actually about the role of new technologies and in particular the role of blockchain. And so I've tried to prepare a brief talking points regarding the benefits of blockchain. So first, let me begin saying that the digitalization of the economy should not only be viewed as an opportunity to expand the tax base. Emerging technologies can be employed by authorities to more effectively and tackle other financial crimes. New technologies like blockchain, artificial intelligence, analytics, and big data are enormous opportunities for fighting corruption and securing more revenue to meet the main financing gap to realize sustainable development. So across the continent, the introduction to blockchain has mainly been through the concept of cryptocurrencies, whose regulation has raised concerns for a number of countries, including Nigeria. Most recently, we've seen, the blocking of the use of currencies in Nigeria. However, the benefits of blockchain technology are still being explored, and so far, there are key benefits that African revenue authorities, in particular, who tend not to have similar legacy issues as developed countries may face. And so, actually, at our policy center, we've been looking into potential for new technologies, and we've had discussions with a number of countries like Thailand, Fiji, carrying out case studies. use of blockchain technology. Before I go into that, I should explain first of all, what do we mean when we say blockchain? So blockchain is a decentralized distributed ledger technology, and it allows the creation, validation, and encrypted transaction of digital assets to happen and get recorded in an incorruptible way, let's say. So it enables direct peer-to-peer transactions between unrelated parties. If revenue authority need information from a business, have this directly accessible to them, make it useful for VAT system, for instance, it would take away the need to share information, automatically audit any of the financials of the company. So it also distributes the information as well as the rights, responsibilities to multiple participants in a shared network. So the information can be owned by a number of parties at one time, and it grants permission or full access to databases in the form of ledgers of information to each participant on the blockchain. And one other aspect of this that's very important is actually tax authorities, financial intelligence, and other law enforcement authorities often deal with our wealth of information. It can help to host that information using one of these ledgers and actually be able to match. So you adopt blockchain and most likely artificial intelligence, which could actually evaluate the characteristics of specific types of crimes or fraud in order to easily detect and ease the process of investigation. So the transparency, immutability, and the security offered by blockchain makes it very easily or ideally suited for use in record keeping, especially for tax authorities, particularly where the ownership of assets is concerned. So one of the specific areas we've been looking into is beneficial ownership information. It can be extremely useful in connecting data about the beneficial owner to data about the assets that they may have interests or ownership in. So
we are going to give the floor to Dr. Wilson Richard, who is of the International Center for Tax and Human ICTD. He should have been the first panelist, but we are going to give him the floor now to actually make his presentation. Dr. Wilson, you have the floor.
Great, thank you very much for the invitation, the organizers. And thank you, and let me begin by congratulating Anthony and the other panelists on having incredibly wonderful contributions to the discussion. I think WATAF in particular for leading many international negotiations on the part of African countries. I won't try to repeat many of the insightful I enjoyed, but instead let me make sort of three broader points. So the question I was asked was about what should be some priorities as African countries thinking about the future and strategies for more effectively taxing the digital economy. And I point towards three things that are very much on my mind. The first is the question of how to approach future international negotiations and the continued international negotiations around international rules. The second is really about the importance of regional coordination and strengthening it further. And then the third is about investing in effective use of digital data within tax administrations. I'd root a lot of my comments and emphasis on the importance of regional cooperation and moving this discussion forward, but also the potential value of sort of research and collective learning on the continent about what's working and what's not in order to push forward successful reform moving forward. On the international front, we've already heard, I think, very clearly from Anthony and tonight about the limitations of recent international negotiations and specific framework rules as put together at present. Those new international rules have created new possibilities, of course, most notably in opening up the possibility of tax strategies beyond the arm's length principle for allocating profits. But I think there's also a lot of uncertainty, as we've heard already, about whether those benefits are likely to accrue to African countries the way the rules are currently written. And certainly I'm very sympathetic to the arguments we've heard already about the value that African countries are also the use of other kinds of digital service taxes or unilateral measures to ensure that they're benefiting and effectively taxing countries to sort of step back from the negotiations in which they can constantly press forward in order to take a systematic and medium-term view, to try to step back and understand in practice what is working and not working about existing rules, to what extent are countries countries successfully raising revenues from the digital economy or not? How effective are these new digital services taxes? Or where are countries struggling to implement international rules as they've been created at the OECD? So I think if there can be a process of regional and continent-wide learning about what's working and not working, that will provide an opportunity for African countries to proactively put forward an agenda for reform in which they'll be able to say concretely, these are the promises, this is what's actually been received, these are the challenges we've encountered in implementing the rules, this is what's needed in order for them to be more effective. And one of the large priorities for us, the International Center for Tax and Development, is to work with partner governments and governments to try to understand more clearly the challenges they encounter in implementing international rules in order to build up the base of evidence as African countries push for further reform to move rules more fully in the direction of their needs and priorities. The second thing I would flag is I think underpinning a lot of this is the importance of regional cooperation. WATAF has played this critical role in trying to encourage regional cooperation around the question of taxing the digital economy. I think there is significant value in countries continuing to push forward that agenda of regional collaboration. And I think that reflects three kinds of things. The first is the advantages administratively of international collaboration. Because countries are trying to tax large multinational companies with complex operations operating across borders, the more there's regional administrative cooperation and data sharing, the more likely are tax administrations to be likely to be able to tax these firms effectively. I think the second benefit of regional collaboration, of course, is negotiating internationally. If we've learned one obvious thing from the recent OECD creations, it's that the making of international tax rules, of course, is not just a technical process, but a political process. And African states are going to be stronger and more forceful in those negotiations, where they can put forward a unified regional voice. And I think critically, not just a unified regional voice, but also but into these negotiations to strengthen that works better for African countries. Second is continuing to reinforce regional cooperation to those efforts. And then thirdly, looking very closely at how new data sources are used by tax administrations and how those efforts can be strengthened by tax administration. Thank you again for the invitation to be here, Paul.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wilson. I think that at this point, we are going to call on the audience for the moment of questions and answers. For this, we want to be precise. We are going to start with my list of 5 questions. The first 5 questions will indicate clearly, okay, the person who they will want to ask the question to in a very clear way, in a very clear manner, okay, so that I will not waste a lot of time.
The microphone. Let's see your hands. Hands up. Okay, 1, 2. I'm a novice when it comes to a specialist.
And I've always struggled, and I'm still struggling, to see the congruence of tax administration that thrives on certainty of the taxable entity, the tax base, and the tax rate, and the alleged, because I'm not too sure, inherent anonymity of blockchain. So if you can just provide some clarification on that, I would love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, firstly, I would like to extend gratitude to our visionary men and women that have migrated from the traditional tax administration to the more modernized one which we now call digital taxation. Actually, my question is has to do with the functionality that the telecommunication system has taken from the bank. We see a lot of function now taken from the bank by telecommunication. And now these communications have emergence of platforms that they deal with. So how can we adequately trace those transactions so as to avoid the leakage of revenue? That's my question. Second speaker.
Nigeria and Kenya not sign on this because a number of proposals that have been made with support, from you had not been adopted, and because they saw essentially that signing on to this result in a loss of key revenues. And so I think just to say we fully support what you had indicated. You had indicated initially that ATF was proposing 35%, and it's sad. I think that when we get to these forums, we now need to almost reduce our expectations in anticipation of the fact that our views will not be reversed. This goes back to the statement that I had made earlier about the lack of inclusivity in the conversations that are currently taking place. And so I think, like you've rightly indicated, the signatories will need to clearly make changes to their legislation. But I think based off of the current conversations, I think we may see, like I mentioned earlier, Kenya and Nigeria potentially not sign on to that. And even though they don't, unfortunately, there's different ways to retaliate, so to speak, which essentially could come into place. But I think by and large, the 35% of residual profits is something that we agree with, we support. Ideally, we would have wanted it to be just on profits, but given that, of course, this is a negotiation, that then seems to us a suitable compromise. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, lady gentlemen, notably for the response in terms of the flight of revenue which Africa uses, as stated by our colleague from Nigeria. I don't know whether the panelists here want to give a little bit more explanation. He cited issues that have to do with the telecommunication and asked how can we avoid such loss of revenue at the level of telecommunication companies. So I don't know whether you have something to add. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I think that the question has to do with the involvement of the telecommunication company in banking activities. We have actually noted that most transactions are done through electronic platforms, and these transactions have to do with all activities carried out by our banks in terms of transfers, online payments that are done by telecommunication companies, and eventually the telecommunication company is also involved in international payment services. So you simply need a telephone card, and you can make international payments, and therefore calls for issues of regulation. And we actually try to make every actor to know their place in these transactions, because we are talking about the loss of resources and also illegal financial flows. If the tracing can be assured,
then I think the problem will not be there. Because, for instance, the companies that are involved in banking transactions, normally even their activities should be done in very transparency to make sure that things are actually done appropriately. In Burkina Faso, one of the companies actually created an additional company to actually be involved in financial transactions. And it's managing two companies, a telephone company and at the same time a financial company. I think we should actually come to a point where we'll be able to have more visibility and to know exactly how this new activity in terms of VAT will be properly handled by the tax authorities. Beyond that, I think it is the form of tracing of all these transactions which should be uppermost in our minds for us to be able to know exactly how these transactions are carried out, and in all transparency, we should actually get to know about this, because this actually open up new areas through which regulation should be brought in terms of tracing all kinds of transactions done online in this way. Thank you.
May I come in and respond to the first? I hope you can hear me. Okay, so I think the two questions, and I'll begin with the first question that was asked, is extremely relevant and very important. So through the work we've been doing on interagency cooperation, and we've been working with over 25 African countries, tax authorities, financial intelligence units, and law enforcement authorities. And we've gotten a chance to understand the nature of data and the nature of data that's used to investigate a tax crime or a financial crime. And often it requires quite often brought together about the nature of business and the nature of perhaps even a criminal network if necessary. In fact, in some cases, that if cooperation is effectively undertaken, then you may even ease capacity, because sometimes two authorities at one time might be undertaking a criminal investigation when they could have been undergoing the easy of the blockchain technology, because it brings together records from multiple owners of that information. And by bringing together this data, you can actually match and create records and create a history of that information. So really about creating records that cannot be changed, and they can be confirmed by other aspects of the blockchain ledger. So different owners of the information can match this information, verify that this information is true, and this information cannot be changed. Now, on the question of whether this is actually transparent, I think it's important to understand how blockchain is developing and where we're going. So at the moment, there is permission access to shared data. So you can actually have specific people accessing specific data. So whether it's ownership data or records or event data. So if a transaction has occurred and it concerns one authority, they can actually access that data. Now, future advances are actually focusing on selective distribution of the data while maintaining the ability for any participant to validate and trust all that data. So what's important is the linking and matching of information, first of all. The second thing is selected access to data where it is relevant to you as an authority. And this issue actually points out the importance of the legal system, because first and foremost, the legal system should enable the sharing of information between authorities. Then it should also enable the use of this type of technology to share that information, and the type of access to that information should also be well defined. So is it automatic access, or is it by request, or is it under specific circumstances? In all cases, we usually say automatic would be very useful, but only if there's security and there's trust. So another aspect of the blockchain is the security of that data, and be happy to go into those details, but there's a few things I want to point out before I go into that, or maybe I could go into it later. What's important is that the blockchain can provide detailed and precise history of the transaction transactions and the asset moved. And underlying that asset is the ownership data and the history of the owner of that asset, right? So you can actually confirm compliance. You can actually ensure that this person is who they say they are, at the same time as ensuring that this asset is Everything still hear me? Okay, yes, so just to close off quickly, I think I'm taking the use of technology. Why? Because actually human capital are the ones identifying the characteristics of crimes. We are the ones actually engaging in investigation and ensuring that this information is true. So the use of a blockchain ledger is only as good as the data that's inputted into it. So the human capital aspect is still extremely important. Just the last one on the telecoms question, I think that blockchain also offers great opportunities to actually monitor the transaction data, because then you can actually have the tax authority connect to a company's data. So in Kenya, for example, you have Safaricom, and this could be on a private ledger, and they can access these transactions and review and reflect on whether or not there's been any fraud or detection of fraud, or even assets that someone did not claim to own but actually owns. So unexplained wealth that needs to be explained. I'll stop there, but I think Wilson might have something to say about telecoms as well. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Joy. And if the chair will allow me, I'll just follow up very briefly.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen of the panel. We also thank the participants who would like to ask us to note that we had started a little late. In a nutshell, we had a discussion which was very rich.
Nous avons pu noter la préoccupation autour de l'aspect légal, c'est-à-dire le support juridique qui doit être un des ciments pour la fiscalité dans le domaine du numérique. Comme c'est un domaine innovant, c'est normal que nous puissions revisiter notre réglementation avant de nous assurer qu'il y a des bases juridiques.
When it has to do with the commitments that we are going to make ourselves, and these recommendations are also what we can actually make available to other entities. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a very big pleasure for the ECOWAS Commission to have been given the opportunity to moderate this high-level policy dialogue. For us to come to the end of this particular session, I would like to wish us the best and also the best in terms of our objective in order to succeed in matters that have to do with taxation of the digital economy. Once again, I congratulate you for your 10th anniversary. Thank you.
Please, let's give the Commissioner a very round of applause. That was Mr. T. Konzi, Commissioner, Trade, Customs and Free Trade, ECOWAS Commission. Please, the Executive Secretary, would you want to come forward for the Commissioner?
To thank Mr. T. Konzi, the Commissioner for Trade and Customs in the ECOWAS Commission for his explanations and his moderation of this morning's
Let me just
meeting.
announce that you've been given a flash drive. The flash drive contains all the presentations we had and we are going to have during this forum. So we want to thank the organizers.
Recording in progress. Recording in progress.
Please, let's give them a round of applause as they have to go back to the Note that you can bring actually your whatever you're going to take.
You can bring actually your whatever you're going to take back into the audience, have it here.
We don't have to be outside. Time is fast spent. We need to start the afternoon session as soon as possible. Give me a group of
Okay, you can go for the coffee break and you can bring in what's the coffee break content, because we have only 15 minutes for it. Very quickly. It's to the right.
Everything is here. Grab a cup of tea or coffee and come back.